Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to a live event. I guess most of us have got over live and gone offline. Even at the association, most of our meetings are offline. But we've just realized there's a lot of information that can continue to be live streamed, and we don't have to meet offline. So it's all about being hybrid. But before we go on to our event today, just wanted to update you the Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Trades Association is the voice of the MSME in the HVAC&R industry in India. To most of you who've been tracking us, about 3 years ago, we were just about 180 odd companies, member companies. As of last month, we are 1,100 member companies across India, representing close to about 10,000 crores of the business done in HVAC&R and a collective employee strength of close to about 65,000 employees. Our association has all kinds of members: manufacturers, traders, system integrators, contractors, sales and service dealers, and consultants, all MSMEs, entrepreneurs who are part of the association, focused only on collective growth. How do we collaborate and grow the industry? Today is Super 30, another session which is held every month, a 30-minute session that talks about knowledge or policy matters that affect our industry. This Super 30 has been a session which only disseminates knowledge, primarily for business owners who are in the industry. And we've been very fortunate to have CEEW as a partner who brings all these Super 30 sessions to us. So today we are talking about enhancing the R&D ecosystem in the Indian HVAC sector. And I have Mr. Bhuvan Ravindran, who is with me today from CEEW. So welcome to the show, Bhuvan. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Mr. Panikkar. Feelings are mutual. I just wanted to check if I'm audible.
Yes, you are audible, loud and clear. So I'm going to hand it over to you to tell us about CEEW and tell our viewers about where the R&D sector and the ecosystem is heading in the HVAC&R sector. Over to you, Bhuvan.
Sure. Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure attending and taking one of the Super 30 sessions once again. And we hope to make this as value creating and application based as possible. Today's topic is enhancing the R&D ecosystem of India's HVAC sector. And this builds on our previous episode on R&D as well. As most of you are aware, India currently stands at the cusp of a sustainable cooling transition that provides a once in a lifetime opportunity for the industry and the economy. But in today's session, we will try and understand the window of opportunity that exists for the industry and the importance of collaborative R&D to leverage this market opportunity that exists. But before we deep dive into the contents of today's presentation, a brief introduction of CEEW. The Council on Energy, Environment and Water, or CEEW, is one of Asia's leading policy research not-for-profit institutions. We use data, integrated analysis, and strategic outreach to explain and change the use, reuse, and misuse of resources. We have 7 focus areas, including a dedicated center for energy finance. And today's presentation has been prepared by the Sustainable Cooling vertical in the technology, finance, and trade focus area. Yeah. So for the purpose of today's presentation, we will be discussing the RAC ecosystem for reasons that even as of 2022-23, room ACs occupy up to 85% of the market share in the cooling sector in HVAC appliances. And this is scheduled to rise to up to 88% by 2037-38, right? And before you is basically an estimate that we have tried to assess. From 2016, which is the date when we had entered into the Kigali Amendment, we have about 26.3 million installed air conditioners in India, which comprises about 2.2% of the global AC installed stock. But this will leapfrog in 2050 to about 1 billion installed ACs in India, where we will cover up to 25%, over a 10% increase, 10 times increase in our global market share of installed ACs. We did a rough back of the envelope calculation to arrive at a ballpark estimate of what this means in terms of sales. This 970 million approximate deficiency or production gap translates into a roughly more than 36 lakh thousand crore in terms of sales. Yeah. So this is a huge window of opportunity. But the question that is pertinent for the viewers and for all of us today here is whether this opportunity will be seized by the Indian HVAC industry or by foreign imports. That will depend upon timely, targeted, and collaborative R&D, which is aimed at strengthening the import-dependent and weak links in India's HVAC supply chain. To sort of establish the baseline as on date, the local value addition in the air conditioning sector is estimated to be about 30 to 50% and of the total value of a unit. And in some components, we are up to 90% dependent on imports, like compressors, for example. This equation needs to change if we are to leverage and capture the Indian RAC market while also becoming globally competitive. So plugging the existing gaps in R&D can help change this equation. We also need to understand to set the foundation that the refrigerant transition by regulation is starting in India by 2028 in view of the recent announcement of that India will be ratifying the Kigali Amendment. India by 2032, therefore, will already be at stage one of the phase down, where we will need to cut down HFCs by 10% by 2032. But by that time, various non Article 5 countries or most of the developed world would already have crossed the third stage of the phase down and have reduced HFCs by up to 70% before 2034. Therefore, if innovative solutions are not available through targeted R&D in the Indian market by the Indian industry, we will be forced again to look at overseas alternatives because we are bound to comply by the Kigali compliances. And therefore, to not miss this opportunity, we must discuss R&D today. In the previous episode of Super 30, we had discussed the importance of collaborative R&Ds to infuse new skills and capabilities in our audience, that is the MSMEs. But what are the target areas or these weak links in the supply chain where MSMEs need to innovate collaboratively or are innovating already? What are the systemic barriers that are inhibiting this collaboration? We will be discussing all these questions today, but from the we will pivot this discussion from two research outputs that CEEW has recently delivered. The first is the CEEW dashboard or the HVAC Innovation Map of India. This is a first of its kind platform that maps and showcases innovations in India's HVAC industry in order to help stakeholders identify who is doing what and where, with what project structure of collaboration, with what amount of investment, and in which component or area of innovation, right? And so the idea is to promote stakeholder collaboration and engagement and facilitate identification of partnerships. Uh, Moving further, we will also launched recently a report identifying the R&D and technology gaps in the HVAC supply chain. Both the dashboard and the report were launched at on 13th May at the National Cooling Dialogue organized by CEEW with its Sheetal Alliance partners. And today we will be discussing findings from both these research outputs, overlaying them as well with discussions in the National Cooling Dialogue to add a sense of temporal relevance to our discussion today. Um, Based on certain qualitative data which we've garnered through surveys, as well as quantitative data that was consistent across these research outputs. Today, we will be discussing three systemic barriers that must be overcome in order to enhance the R&D ecosystem for India's HVAC sector. We will be discussing each of these three in the subsequent slides, starting with the need for greater industry and academia interface in R&D. Interestingly, out of all the innovations that was mapped by the dashboard, an overwhelming majority were taking place in research institutions or universities in collaboration with government departments, but without any industrial collaboration. This exposed a mismatch between the industry's priority for innovation and the academia's priority for innovation. Out of the remaining 35% that were taking place with industrial presence, up to 23% of the innovation is undertaken by industry in-house and without further knowledge exchange or industrial collaboration. The dearth of this industry academia collaboration for R&D is quite clear, and the results seem to be that innovation is not ending up strengthening those weaker links in the supply chain. The full potential of the competencies that are available in the industry are also not tapped, and this may result in the industry losing its competitive advantage. How is that? We see the noteworthy finding here is that the import share, from which was found in our report, uh, is that the import share is higher in the case of technology intensive components like compressors and drives, not in the case of components which are relatively easy to manufacture in the domestic market. But where the majority of the innovation is taking place in is not in these technology intensive components. Taking the case of compressors and drives just mentioned, they together comprise up to 50% of the value of a single RAC unit. But when we are in compressors up to 85% and drives up to 90% import dependent. Yet, only up to 12% of the innovation that we mapped on the dashboard is taking place on compressors and variable speed drives. While industry is not delving much into not in kind technologies, academia is. So the gaps in our existing supply chains where we are import dependent remain large and looming. Yeah. A crucial part of our supply chain, therefore, remains dependent. As per the technology challenges that were identified in the report that we published, we see that the know how for manufacturing is extremely layered, complicated, and in many cases, IP dependent as well. However, out of all the innovations mapped, even in speed drives, if we consider not just compressors, still the innovation remains up to 12%. Yeah. Moreover, if we see the current constitution of the HVAC supply chain, MSMEs are not involved in the subsystems or the components that go into putting together a compressor. These dynamics, therefore, need to change. Moving further, the other systemic flaw that we could highlight was that there are a lot of innovations happening, but they are too scattered and small scale. To innovate in compressors and speed drives, heat exchangers for that matter, we need high intensive innovation efforts. But most of the innovation efforts that we mapped are only low capital intensive innovations that are taking place, a gap that can again be bridged if there is greater collaboration between industry, MSMEs, academia, and government. The dashboard revealed that a large amount of innovation, nearly 80% of all innovations in the dashboard, are less than 1 crore. So, if we try and examine the location of these various initiatives, we realize that they are scattered. Coincidentally, the same is true for India's HVAC manufacturing landscape as well, not just its R&D manufacturing. So therefore, that shows that proximity, between manufacturing and R&D facilities is key for greater knowledge exchange, which is required to bridge the R&D gap. Our report finds that despite the size and the growth potential of the Indian market, stakeholders have often cited scale as a drawback in achieving competitiveness, which is surprising. And interviews that were conducted during the preparation of the report revealed that this is ascribed largely to the fragmented nature of the manufacturing and innovation landscape. This which prevents the free flow of knowledge exchange, which shall be the third systemic barrier that we shall address. When manufacturing is small and scattered, it and the proximity of OEMs and MSMEs is reduced, what is also inhibited is vendor development. Yeah, the OEMs and MSME dependencies that would otherwise be created because of a cluster or approximate location of the two facilities, those dependencies are not created. So while there is a commercial investment from an OEM into an MSME, there is no technical investment, or there is a lack of technical investment. What we need to graduate from is a psychology of procurement to a psychology of vendor development. And for that, addressing the scattered and small scale nature will be key. And having a greater collaborative system will can bridge that gap. Yeah. Moving further, so basically this part from this is again a screenshot from the dashboard which showed that all the major investment in the weaker links of the supply chain is taking place is being conducted by the industry. So we need that collaboration to happen. The third challenge that we address here is that of lack of knowledge exchange. To create an environment which is conducive to the free exchange of knowledge and process know-how is definitely key for collaborative R&D. However, only 6% of the innovations mapped by the dashboard were structured along the lines of a knowledge transfer mechanism. Even during the CEEW national dialogue that we had conducted, the need for greater collaboration within the industry, not just academia industrial interface, but within the industry between OEMs and MSMEs, that hand holding was considered greatly important. The report also found that a lack of process knowledge and product requirements inhibits the growth or the ability of the MSMEs to innovate and keep up. Yeah, this is a gap that can again be bridged through a greater collaboration and better knowledge exchange between stakeholders, specifically OEMs and MSMEs. Uh, the technical know-how, exchange of the technical know-how, which remains limited, especially in the case of these capital and technology intensive components. That technical know-how and product knowledge can then be effectively transferred and imparted to the MSMEs, which who can then use or translate that knowledge to improve, standardize, and adopt updated processes in their own chains at the manufacturing facilities. CEW's innovation map is a step in this direction, and that's what we hope it to be, to bring together different stakeholders in the industry so that they can identify what innovation is taking place where, in what proximity, what is the potential, what is their structure, how much investment do they need, and bring them closer to facilitate this knowledge exchange and collaborative R&D ecosystem. Uh, Coming to some recommendations that we have tabled, obviously one that is oft repeated is the need for greater industry academia in collaboration, and the reason is so that there is an alignment of the priorities, the innovation priorities, and we what target those links in the supply chain which can improve our stand in our local and global markets as well. Otherwise, we will struggle to cope up with the innovations that are happening elsewhere. Uh, Enhancing energy efficiency, interestingly, and emissions reduction. These two motivations emerged as key drivers for innovation. I repeat, enhancing energy efficiency and emissions reduction. So these are already two common areas where industry and academia can explore greater collaboration and interface. And therefore, it emerges as a common purpose or objective upon which their innovation efforts can align. Uh, the dashboard has also identified a number of clusters that are emerging, and there are already some clusters that are hoping to be emerging in areas like Nimrana. Bombay, for example, the dashboard reveals has some clusters. If these can be made more structured, recognized, given the structure, the recognition of a cluster, an SEZ, and that can facilitate greater collaborative R&D as well. The dashboard also heroes certain MSME players, and we want them to receive greater support because of the greater investment and time and know-how that they have invested in innovation. And there also needs to be a greater uh, investment and focus on disruptive technology, because the ICAP goals by 2037-38 require a 20 to 25% reduction in the cooling demand, as well as in the use of refrigerants by up to 25 to 30%. So all these will require certain other interventions like not in kind and innovations in air coolers, for example. So we need to also focus on those areas. So I will leave it for now, leave the presentation here for now, and open it to you, Mr. Panikar, for any questions that you or the audience may have. And I'll try and link other findings from the report into those questions. Over to you.
Awesome. That's good. Yeah. So one of the questions that I had is, I think this is the first of a kind that we've had called as the HVAC Innovation Map. Do you want to actually showcase that map once more? If you can show it, go live onto that map, and also explain to our viewers, most of them who are already into who are probably are innovating around in the industry and would like to be on that map, how can they can apply to their innovation?
Sure, sure, Mr. Panikar. I'll just share my screen. Just let me know once
Yeah,
it's visible.
sure.
Can you see the dashboard?
Yeah, it's coming up. Yeah, I got the dashboard. Go ahead. You can talk about that
Perfect.
now.
So if I'm an MSME and I just opened this link, which will also be available on the chat for all the viewers, you can obviously use the three filters that are there on the left, where you can filter innovations by state. These are auto-adjusting filters. So once you say, for example, select the state of, since Mr. Panikar, you are in Maharashtra, I'll go with Maharashtra. And automatically the areas of innovation that we have for Maharashtra will appear. So if for a particular state, we have not received entries for any particular area of innovation, that will not appear. And if you submit accordingly, the dashboard will show only those pegs and entries that are in Maharashtra appear on the map. This is the map view. You can also opt for the list view, where you can go ahead and just read the text without the graphics about the innovation projects that are taking place. Further, if you don't find yourself on the map and you would want to be visible, increase your innovation efforts visibility, or even if it's a project that you've recently piloted and is now being commercialized, you can list yourself on the map by clicking on this button on the top right of your screen, which in blue called Get Listed on the Map. As soon as you click on this link, it will redirect you to an online form that we had circulated in our efforts of data collection to create and curate this dashboard. There'll be certain simple entries that will require you to fill, and we will then curate your information and put it up on the dashboard in on the map. That also, to process the data, to analyze the data that we received from the form, and also data that we adopted from DST, we have created some graphs that sort of give a snapshot of the HVAC innovation landscape. And we obviously look forward to increasing the depth and quantum of the information, so that the dashboard in times to come can be a central, easy to access repository for stakeholders to identify those green catchments, which through which they can collaborate and strengthen those weak supply chain links that we were discussing. So that's for the dashboard, Mr. Panikar.
Amazing. So tell us something, Bhuvan. This is probably the first time that an innovation map was created, especially for the first time for the industry. What is the thought process that actually went behind? I mean, what are we trying to achieve through this innovation map?
So in fact, I'll extrapolate on one of the findings or one of the thoughts that were shared during the National Cooling Dialogue that CEEW had organized, a veteran in the field shared that till date, there are many stakeholders from the industry who contact them to know what are the various component and sub-component manufacturers from whom they can continue to diversify their own sourcing requirements. So there is clearly a knowledge gap that exists within the HVAC industry, within the stakeholders, that needs to be bridged. And there is no central, reliable repository of all the innovation efforts that are taking place. So, if I look at it from an OEM's perspective, currently what is happening is that the OEMs are continuing to import their components while only diverse, including local component manufacturers to de-risk their sourcing. But if we can sort of increase the visibility of the local manufacturers, show their competence that that they have within the country, then we would want these OEMs also to refer to the dashboard and contact these local heroes, and which is why we again are requiring them to come on board and still register on the dashboard, which will be a live, dynamic, ongoing effort. Secondly, even the government is supporting a lot of star players in the industry, and we would want to, through this dashboard, give them greater visibility. Currently, there exists a database of innovation that is mostly limited to those innovation efforts which are government funded, because there is a 2012 act that mandates disclosure of government funded innovation efforts. But this dashboard goes a step beyond that to also include private innovation efforts which are not mandated to disclose their details. So we are creating greater transparency in the R&D efforts and bridging an existing knowledge gap that can help connect government, academia, and industry, help them identify priorities and innovations, which will definitely strengthen the weak supply chains. Uh, but to contextualize this dashboard, why has it come out in 2022? What's its importance now? The window of opportunity that we have currently in the local and global market is a golden period, right? Because if we see in the US, for example, they've imposed 25% tariffs on HVAC imports from China, but the same tariff for Indian HVAC imports is only from 0 to 2.5%. So while we earlier, manufacturers used to cite cost as a reason where we lose the competitive edge, now the playing field is being leveled in the HVAC market on cost, for example. But we can't afford to lack in technology, because if we lack in R&D and technology, China and other countries will continue to dominate the market, even if the playing field is leveled for cost. So this dashboard, therefore, has that potential to bring the key stakeholders together.
Amazing. I think it's a great, I mean, it's great to have that innovation map, the first of the kind, I think, for any industry. And I'm glad it's come in the HVAC industry. And I think that's a great way. And it also helps connect and understand who's doing what, where, and reach out. So it's great for even for the association to track where these innovations are happening. So that's about time we have. Just about before we close, last thing, Bhuvan, we had this entire paper that you released during the national dialogue, which was the technology gaps in India's air conditioning supply chain. A brilliant paper, very well written, a lot of information around it. I had the privilege of being at this event and on also going through this entire document. So, Bhuvan, so if our viewers want to get access to this paper, how do they get access to this paper?
So it's available on the CEEW website. I'll try and even source the link and send it across to you, Mr. Panikar. So
Yeah, we already have the link. We already have the link. All the RATA members, if you're already a RATA member, you would have already received an email from the association sharing the link to download this. But if you are not and you still want to access it, you can get to the CEW website, as Bhuvan said, or feel free to reach the RATA office and we'll be very happy to share that entire document with you. But it's available on the internet. You can go to the website and download it. It's a fantastic document that's written, a document that was most required to get a perspective of how do we become Atmanirbhar? Where are the gaps in it? and how do we start working towards it. So amazing. So great, Bhuvan. That's exactly 30 minutes which we had. So thank you very much for uh, being here. Yeah, so I've got the link which I am now posting it in the comment section, where you can use that link and you can download it. I've just posted it in all the comment section so you can see it. This is the link that has been posted. Look at the comment section from where you're watching us, and you can see this link. Click on it and you can download that event. So thank you very much, Bhuvan. Thank you very much for taking time out and being with us today. And that was a very informative session. And we look forward to another Super 30 session next month on a new topic that can enrich the knowledge of our entrepreneurs from our industry. Thank you very much, Bhuvan.
Thank you, Mr. Panikkar. Always a pleasure.
Thanks a lot.